October 6, 1941. The forest east of Mtsensk trembles as Feldwebel Otto Klein locks eyes on the hulking silhouette ahead. Smoke, diesel, and sweat fill the cramped turret of his Panzer III. Klein steadies the 50mm KWK-38 cannon, breath tight, gloved hand squeezing the trigger. The shot erupts, deafening, muzzle flash blinding in the gloom. The shell slams into the Soviet T-34 at 400 meters, point blank. It ricochets harmlessly off the angled green armor, arcing away with a mocking metallic shriek. Klein's loader curses, the gunner blinks in disbelief. Another round, the same infuriating result. The T-34 is still coming, Tank Commander Stone faced inside the vision port, unflinching. Panic flares in the German crew. Klein's radio operator yells, "Got, it's unstoppable." The T-34's turret swings. A thunderous 76.2mm shell erupts, tearing through the undergrowth and punching into a Panzer IV just meters away. Flames roar. Klein's driver slams the gears into reverse, treads thrashing mud. All along the line, confusion reigns. 3 more shots, 3 more failures. Radio static crackles with frantic voices. It's bouncing. Nothing gets through. German tanks lurch backward, some stuck, some burning. For the first time, the elite 4th Panzer Division faces an armored foe that shrugs off German firepower. The pride of the Blitzkrieg, hunted in the Russian woods. Across a 9-kilometer front, 23 German tanks report the same impossible scenario. Shells bouncing, T-34s advancing, discipline unraveling. In 1 hour, over a dozen panzers are wrecked, crews stumbling from hatches. Silence settles briefly as the Soviets surge onward. But 72 hours earlier, not a single German officer believed any of this could be real. 72 hours earlier, the mood at the 4th Panzer Division headquarters pulses with confidence. Tank crews boast over cooling engines, dismissing rumors. Russian tanks are tractors welded with old iron. Hauptmann Dietrich Lang jokes at breakfast. That's the gospel. The Soviet machines are slow, poorly armed, obsolete. German doctrine, German steel, German training, all clearly superior. Reports of a new heavy tank spark laughter. One colonel proclaims at briefing, "Our panzers have faced everything the Soviets can produce." But under the bravado, critical signals go ignored. Captured Soviet reports, intercepted broadcasts from the southwestern front, scattered panicked communiques, each hint at something else. Odd silhouette seen near Bryansk, a Soviet officer found dead beside an unfamiliar tread pattern. Intelligence officers file these as unsubstantiated. Even when an aerial reconnaissance flight snaps blurry photos of wide-tracked, sloped armored vehicles hauling through the mud on October 3rd, the message is muffled by skepticism. Logistics planners chart the advance on the map, no contingency for surprise. While the Germans dismiss, Major General Mikhail Kadukov drills his 4th Tank Brigade in silent woods. 26 T-34s and a handful of KVs, hidden, waiting. Their orders: strike where the Germans feel untouchable. The stage narrows, 2 enemies, fate drawing them closer. October 6, 0412 hours, the German column punches through the tree line, expecting to hunt. They are about to meet the hunted-turned-hunter. At 0412 hours, October 6th, they would discover the truth. First contact, minutes after dawn. Feldwebel Klein's panzer column edges down a muddy ridge, cupola fogging. "Fire!" Klein calls as 2 shadows emerge through the birches, vehicles unlike any in their playbooks. A Panzer III's shot clangs off the closest tank. The vision slit slides open, a red star glaring. Inside, Soviet tank commander Lieutenant Sergei Ivanov grins, realizing the Germans can't touch them. The radio channel, clear seconds ago, now bursts with chaos. Second platoon reports, "Shell bounced." The next message is worse, T-34 turning, requests support. 2 T-34s smash through fallen birches, shattering the German flank. Klein sights another, orders armor piercing, but nothing penetrates. 6 more panzers open up, 6 more bounces. Dust, screams, shouts in 3 languages. Static and cannon fire blend into cacophony. 9 vehicles disabled within minutes, smoke pillaring above the trees. Commanders shout for artillery that will never arrive in time. What started as a routine advance is turning to slaughter. Suddenly, radio silence breaks. All units retreat to secondary line. The impossible spreads across the division. Veteran crews are in retreat, transmission oil burning in their nostrils. Klein glimpses abandoned helmets on the muddy verge. The voices on the radio are changed. Shock, puzzle, panic. A metallic echo hangs over Mtsensk's battlefield, but this was only the first hour. What happened over the next 6 hours would force the entire German army to rewrite its doctrine. It's now 0730 hours, October 6th. The sun struggles through the morning haze east of Mtsensk as the battered 4th Panzer Division regroups along a shallow stream in a patch of charred undergrowth. Here, the remaining Panzer III and IV crews, shaken but defiant, hastily realign their vehicles behind improvised barricades. Fallen trees, abandoned trucks, anything to slow the Soviet tide. Forward observers scramble to relay targeting coordinates to divisional artillery, while medical corpsmen weave between burning hulks, hauling wounded tankers to hastily dug foxholes. Suddenly, the rumble returns, 2 full companies of T-34s and KV-1s fan out, moving like phantoms through the mist. Beneath the German shells, their advance grinds on. The tempo shifts, now it's a fight for survival. On the Soviet side, communications crackle as Kadukov's tankers break over the German line. Lieutenant Ivanov's compartment stinks of cordite and sweat, but morale surges. Their radios buzz with half-shouted orders. Press the attack, no mercy. Yet even the T-34s encounter their own chaos. Vision slits offer poor sightlines and fallen branches jam the tracks. One Soviet platoon overshoots the main road, careening into a swamp where 2 T-34s bog down, nearly lost. For Soviet infantry clinging to the tanks, it's an ordeal of mud and shrapnel. Still, the momentum holds. Each tank that plunges forward chips further into German cohesion. By mid-morning, the tide turns decisively. By 1100 hours, over 24 German tanks are out of action, more than half destroyed, the rest immobilized or abandoned. Soviet machine gunners rake the shallow German positions. Flames consume another Panzer IV. The Char B-1s and captured French vehicles pressed into German service are exposed as especially vulnerable, knocked out in minutes. The center collapses, and survivors flee toward the secondary trench line. Kadukov's spearhead has punched a 2-kilometer gap through the German armor, capturing swaths of the southern woods. The outcome is no longer in doubt. Desperate, Oberst Raus radios divisional headquarters at 11:15, demanding reinforcements and air support. Subordinate commanders relay garbled reports upstream. Enemy tanks are impervious, casualties climbing by the hour, flanks gone. Yet by the time his messages reach 2nd Panzer Army, it's too late. The Soviet breakthrough is a fait accompli. Orders to counterattack arrive piecemeal, often to units that no longer exist. The T-34's dominance at Mtsensk was rooted in its technical edge over German armor of 1941, where the Panzer III and early Panzer IVs boasted, at best, 30-50 mm of frontal armor and 50 mm guns. The T-34's sloped armor reached an effective thickness of up to 70 mm. The Germans' 50 mm KWK-38 could penetrate only 38 mm at 500 meters, woefully inadequate against the T-34's glacis and turret face. German AP rounds shattered or deflected at 200 meters, leaving tankers helpless unless they could maneuver for rare side or rear shots. Tank doctrine of the time, fixated on maneuver and rapid exploitation, was shaped by previous victories over obsolete Soviet BT series and French Samua tanks. But no pre-invasion trials considered a massed foe with such resilient armor, and a high-velocity 76.2 mm cannon capable of knocking out German tanks at double the effective distance. Strategically, the Germans found themselves out-positioned not just by hardware, but by the Russian use of terrain and defensive doctrine. Kadukov's brigade exploited the forested choke points and marshy gullies, forcing German tanks into narrow kill zones, negating their training in rapid open-field battles. The decision to disperse the Panzer Regiment across multiple columns, instead of massing at the point of contact, diluted their firepower and limited their immediate response. These deployment choices reflected orders issued by divisional command, based on outdated assumptions and unverified intelligence. Compared to earlier clashes in Poland and France, where German reconnaissance had revealed enemy armor in advance, here the Soviets achieved near total surprise through camouflage, misdirection, and sudden concentration. Captured German battalion logs reference, again and again, unknown enemy type, immune to all current armament. In post-war interrogations, surviving crewmen described point-blank shots, no effect, and panic as if facing a ghost. Soviet after-action reports confirmed 36 German armored vehicles destroyed or abandoned in just 7 hours. The battlefield debris, twisted hulls, ruptured tracks would become grim evidence, and Allied intelligence summaries after the war consistently cite the battle as the rupture point of German panzer doctrine. As the Soviet advance wiped out exposed German armor, surviving grenadier companies retreated in disarray to their next fallback line along the Vyselki Heights. By nightfall on October 6th, 3 battalion strength units, totaling roughly 1,700 men, had abandoned equipment as they scrambled to regroup, ceding their artillery positions and much of their reserve ammunition. Catastrophic radio intercepts reported the loss of at least 1 full panzer company, with divisional engineers tasked to blow bridges south of the Orel Road to slow the enemy. Orders went out: dig new anti-tank ditches, fortify the secondary defense sector, prepare demolitions for both highways and rail lines. The 3rd Panzer Group, stationed 60 kilometers north, ordered 2 motorized infantry battalions to redeploy south by forced march, covering a gap now wide open to further Soviet exploitation. Higher in the command structure, the shock of the day's events reached General Guderian by 2000 hours via a series of fragmented situation reports. Rouse's frantic radio messages, followed by precise damage assessments from artillery spotters, forced a recalibration. At midnight, orders stipulated a halt to offensive operations on the eastern front of Army Group Center. Instead, resources were redirected to patch the Mtsensk breach. Meanwhile, German intelligence officers issued a standing order to interrogate captured tank crews for technical specifications, reflecting a newfound urgency and panic about the capabilities of this unforeseen enemy machine. Total German tank losses at Mtsensk were 57 vehicles destroyed or abandoned, over 65% of the division's available armor. Human casualties exceeded 420 killed and wounded, while the Soviets, though also suffering losses in immobilized tanks and infantry, claimed to hold all ground east of Mtsensk by October 8th. The German timetable for Operation Typhoon was disrupted by a minimum of 72 hours, delaying the larger push toward Moscow and straining logistics across the whole front. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. Fact 1. Personal account: a tattered field diary found decades later in a former Soviet Army depot belonged to Jeffreiter Helmut Gross, gunner in the 35th Panzer Regiment. On October 6th, he scribbled, "Every shot ricocheted. We tried 5 times. The Russian tank drove toward us, indifferent to our fire." Gross admitted, "I considered running." Such admissions, fear, failure, were suppressed in post-war narratives and omitted from official correspondence, only surfacing when the diary was digitized in 2002 by a regional archive. The personal fear and confusion he reveals contradict the post-war insistence on unwavering German discipline under fire. Fact 2. Logistical reality quartermaster transfer sheets, declassified from Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv, show that by October 5th, only 71 armor-piercing ammunition crates reached the 4th Panzer Division at Mtsensk, less than 65% of projected supply. Artillery logs further note 37 depleted tanks received only high-explosive rounds as substitutes, while German official reports claimed all units sufficiently equipped. Frontline formations faced severe shortages, forcing crews to conserve anti-tank rounds and attempt makeshift repairs for immobilized vehicles. This erosion of firepower critically diminished their ability to blunt the Soviet assault. Fact 3. Official versus actual records after action reports from the 4th Panzer Division, submitted October 9th, stated losses of 23 tanks knocked out, 8 damaged. Yet, recently opened Soviet unit logs and aerial reconnaissance imagery confirm at least 42 destroyed or abandoned German vehicles along the 9-kilometer engagement corridor. The discrepancy likely reflects both German desire to mask the severity of their defeat from higher command and the chaos of post-battle accounting. For decades, Western scholarship relied on underreported German figures, misjudging the scale and impact of the engagement. Fact 4. Ground-level reality. Multiple accounts reveal that tank crews, lacking effective anti-T-34 tactics, resorted to immobilizing T-34s with smoke grenades or aiming at treads, methods absent from formal doctrine. Several crews stripped machine guns from wrecked French Char B-1s and used them defensively. These improvisations, noted in letters home and in Red Army interrogation notes, show a recurring pattern of battlefield adaptation, the necessity, not the expectation, of survival strategies on both sides. Fact 5. Environmental factor. Meteorological data recorded at a Soviet forward aid station shows night temperatures dropped to 3 degrees Celsius, with lingering autumn rainfall creating dense mud and fog. German engines struggled. 1 maintenance log documents 5 vehicles lost to mud, 2 due to water ingestion in carburetors. T-34s outperformed panzers, their wide tracks dispersing weight, while thin-keeled German models routinely bogged down. These adverse conditions magnified every material weakness, neutralizing German speed and exacerbating confusion. Paragraph 1. Initial interpretation. In the decades immediately following World War II, Western historians largely interpreted the battle at Mtsensk as a footnote to Operation Typhoon, a minor setback quickly overcome by the overall German advance. This view prevailed in the works of Guderian and other memoirists, who had privileged access to official, after-action reports and divisional loss figures. The sources available were primarily Wehrmacht archival records, sanitized for an international audience and carefully managed by post-war intelligence agencies. The general consensus held that the Germans encountered heavier than expected resistance, but maintained technical and tactical superiority. Personal accounts describing battlefield panic or the true impact of Soviet armor were omitted from published histories. Paragraph 2. Revised understanding. The opening of Russian and German archives in the 1990s and 2000s, along with the declassification of aerial photography and logistical records, forced scholars to reassess the confrontation at Mtsensk. Newly accessible Soviet documentation revealed a coordinated, deliberate counteroffensive by Kadukov's brigade, not a mere accident of geography. Precise loss figures, unearthed from unit logs, exposed gross underreporting in German documents. Survivor testimonies and diaries, especially those describing psychological stress and confusion, challenged the sanitized story told by division commanders. The technical superiority of the T-34 and KV-1 became central to the Ray-evaluated narrative, overturning the prior perception of German invulnerability in 1941. Paragraph 3. Current consensus. Modern historians now broadly agree that the Battle of Mtsensk represented a turning point in armored warfare. It shattered the myth of German technical superiority and initiated a frantic reformulation of German anti-tank doctrine. There is consensus that logistical failures and misread intelligence played pivotal roles in the German defeat. Debate continues regarding the operational significance, whether Mtsensk alone delayed Operation Typhoon or merely exposed broader weaknesses. Still, the psychological and doctrinal shock that swept through German command is recognized as transformative in the literature. Individual 1. Primary focus. Sergeant Vasily Dmitrievich Prokhorov, commander of a T-34 in the 4th Tank Brigade, was 27 years old and from Kursk. Before the war, he worked as a railway engineer. At Mtsensk, Prokhorov's tank spearheaded the assault at dawn, taking multiple glancing hits before destroying 2 Panzer IIIs at 30 meters. In his later oral history, he described the chaos. "We could see the German faces when they realized shooting did nothing. That gave us courage, but also fear our luck could end in a second." After the war, Prokhorov survived wounds sustained near Kharkov in 1943 and returned to railway work until his death in 1978. His testimony is preserved at the Central Archive of the Ministry of Defense in Podolsk. Individual 2. Enemy Perspective Unteroffizier Karl Beck, loader in the 35th Panzer Regiment, described firing repeatedly at T-34s to no effect and scrambling from a burning Panzer IV. He was captured and spent 3 years as a POW in Tambov. His memoir, written post-war, notes, "We never imagined anything could stop us. That day we saw fear, ours, not theirs." Beck survived and returned to Heidelberg, where he taught school. His account paralleled Soviet memories of shock and confusion. Individual 3. Long-term impact Lydia Artemieva, a battlefield nurse who treated both Soviet and German wounded at Mtsensk, struggled with recurring nightmares and panic attacks for decades, classic symptoms of post-traumatic stress, though unrecognized at the time. She was medically discharged, later advocating for recognition of nervous injuries among veterans. Cases like Lydia's typified hidden trauma among medical staff and soldiers, influencing, by the 1970s, new Soviet policies on psychological screening and rehabilitation. These individual experiences, when examined across hundreds of documented cases, revealed patterns that shaped strategic decisions throughout the campaign. Within hours of the Soviet breakthrough at Mtsensk on October 6, 1941, chaos rippled across the headquarters of the German 4th Panzer Division. Radio intercepts revealed catastrophic losses: 57 tanks destroyed or abandoned, more than 420 casualties, and the immediate cession of key terrain east of Mtsensk. Field commanders issued urgent orders to seal the breach. Anti-tank ditches were dug overnight, bridges rigged for demolition, and artillery was repositioned to cover the compromised flanks. At the same time, reconnaissance platoons scrambled to assess whether the Soviet armored spearhead threatened deeper advances. Supply officers tallied up shortages, ammunition, and spare parts, warning that resupply would not arrive in time for a counterattack. In the ensuing days, German High Command, stunned by intelligence summaries, paused offensive operations along the Army Group's southeastern sector. Divisions intended for the Moscow drive were instead diverted to reinforce the battered front, and at least 2 motorized infantry battalions completed forced marches south, making up for the shattered defensive line. The anticipated progress of Operation Typhoon, scheduled to surge toward Tula, was delayed by a minimum of 72 hours. Actual casualties and equipment losses far exceeded optimistic pre-battle estimates. With only 71 crates of armor-piercing ammunition delivered instead of the projected 110, firepower was sharply diminished. Fuel and rations were rerouted from supporting columns to frontline units, further straining the logistical backbone of Army Group Center. Weeks after the battle, German planners finally reckoned with the scale of the disaster. The timeline for Moscow's encirclement was revised, while battered armored units received piecemeal replacements from as far as Germany itself. Command shakeups followed. Oberst Raus was temporarily relieved for questioning, and divisional intelligence officers were redeployed to better interpret enemy signals. Territory once considered secure south of the Orel Road was now contested ground. Soviet brigades exploited the breach to launch spoiling attacks. New anti-tank tactics disseminated through Wehrmacht training, emphasizing flanking maneuvers and improved coordination between infantry and armor. The long-term ripple extended into 1942 and beyond. Production priorities shifted. The German army demanded new upgunned Panzer IVs with longer-barreled 75mm cannons, sacrificing planned output of lighter vehicles. Strategic planners canceled or delayed secondary offensives to compensate for the growing tank deficit. Resources allocated for Barbarossa's southern push were quietly funneled to armor rearmament. The myth of German panzer invincibility was shattered. From Mtsensk onward, both sides raced to innovate, knowing technical surprise had decisively altered the war's tempo. If the T-34s and KV-1s had not been deployed with such shock and concentration at Mtsensk on October 6, 1941, the entire trajectory of Operation Typhoon might have remained undisturbed. German panzer columns, expecting only light opposition, would have surged eastward, perhaps enveloping Tula and threatening Moscow weeks earlier. Casualty projections would have been halved, with the 4th Panzer Division retaining vital armor strength for subsequent operations. Soviet morale may have wavered, and the myth of German armored supremacy could have persisted. Historians speculate that, absent the Mtsensk engagement, up to 18,000 additional German troops could have been positioned for the assault on Moscow before the onset of winter, modifying both the scale and the outcome of the Eastern Front's most critical campaign. When compared to landmark armored clashes, such as Prokhorovka or Arakwart, Mtsensk stands out less for its sheer scale and more for its profound doctrinal repercussions. The engagement was far smaller in terms of total troops and machines committed, yet its outcome forced an immediate, comprehensive reassessment of German tank design, tactics, and logistics. Unlike the massive battles of later years, Mtsensk's value lay in its demonstration that qualitative hardware and tactical shock could rout a doctrinally superior force. Military academies worldwide dissect the battle for precisely this reason. It marks the inflection point where the tool, the tank, became the true arbiter of battlefield success, superseding dogma and expectation. Among historians, there is agreement that the Battle of Mtsensk constitutes the moment doctrine gave way to reality. Debate continues, however, regarding whether the delay it imposed was decisive for the overall Moscow campaign or merely symptomatic of deeper shortcomings in German preparation. The prevailing academic position holds that, while Mtsensk alone did not doom Operation Typhoon, the demonstrated failure of German armor and logistics there marks a watershed, fundamentally shifting both Soviet and German strategic expectations for the rest of the war. Sergeant Vasily Dmitrievich Prokhorov, the T-34 commander whose tank led the charge at Mtsensk, survived the war despite severe wounds. After returning to civilian life on the railways, his recollections were captured in a 1969 interview for the Central Archive of the Ministry of Defense. "We could see the German faces when they realized shooting did nothing," he said years later. "That gave us courage." Prokhorov's account, preserved in oral histories and Russian military museums, is regularly cited in documentaries and educational texts. His legacy endures in both scholarship and in the memory of Kursk, where a memorial plaque bears his name. Institutionally, Mtsensk's legacy is tangible. In 1986, the Mtsensk Armored Corps Memorial was dedicated at the eastern edge of the town, commemorating the sacrifices of both Red Army and German POWs. Annual ceremonies take place every October, bringing together descendants, veterans associations, and military cadets to honor the battle's impact. The lessons of Mtsensk are core to curricula at the Frunze Military Academy and in West Point's advanced armor courses. After action studies from 1942-43 directly informed German doctrine revisions, including the introduction of the Panzer IV Ausführung G in 1942 with the L-43 main gun, developed specifically to counter the T-34's armor. Soviet anti-tank doctrine and combined arms tactics, refined in the aftermath, shaped engagements for the remainder of the war. The tactical principles learned, emphasizing improved armor sloping, speed, and all-terrain capability, set benchmarks for tank design worldwide. Modern operations, from Israeli use of the Merkava to U.S. deployment of the Abrams, trace their emphasis on survivability and firepower to analysis of clashes like Mtsensk. Remote-controlled anti-tank weapons, advances in battlefield recovery, and the nuanced balance between doctrine and innovation all reflect a legacy born from crisis and adaptation.